The scent of turpentine and linseed oil was the first thing that hit me. When I walked through the door, it was Inais's scent, a smell I once found comforting, a sign that she was lost in her world, creating something beautiful from nothing. Now, it just smelled like failure. The tiny apartment felt smaller today, the walls closing in, suffocating me with the weight of my choices. 3 years. 3 years since I'd walked away from my father's empire for this, for her, for love. A bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. Love doesn't pay the bills. I dropped my keys into the cracked ceramic bowl by the door. The clatter unnaturally loud in the quiet space. Anne was in her studio, the corner of our living room. She'd cordoned off with a stained drop cloth and a rickety easel. Her back was to me, her slight frame hunched over a canvas I couldn't see. She was wearing my old Oxford shirt, the one with the frayed collar, spattered with a rainbow of oil paints. She hadn't heard me come in. She rarely did when she was painting. Anne, my voice was flat, devoid of the warmth it used to hold. She jumped, a small gasp escaping her. A paintbrush clattered to the floorboards. Kellen, you're home early. She turned, a smear of ultramarine blue on her cheek, her smile bright and guileless. That smile used to disarm me completely. Now, it just felt like a shield, hiding the reality of our situation. How was your day? The usual, I said, loosening the cheap tie strangling my neck. I worked as a junior analyst at a soulless investment firm, a job I was ridiculously overqualified for but was the best I could get. Without my father's name opening doors for me, Kellen Sterling. The name meant nothing now. My father, Marcus Sterling, had made sure of that. Harrison spent an hour yelling about quarterly projections. My spreadsheet had a formatting error. The fate of the free world apparently hung in the balance. Inais's smile faltered, replaced by that look of gentle sympathy I'd come to despise. It made me feel weak, pathetic. Oh, darling, I'm sorry. Why don't you sit down? I'll make you some tea. I don't want tea, Inae. I walked past her, my eyes deliberately avoiding the canvas on the easel. I didn't want to see another abstract swirl of colors that nobody would ever buy. We couldn't afford more paint, let alone the rent. The eviction notice was tucked in my briefcase, a crisp, terrifying reminder that we were 2 weeks away from being on the street. We need to talk. Her hands twisted in the hem of the paint-stained shirt. Okay. Her voice was a small thing, a mouse scurrying from the shadow of a hawk. What is it? I pulled the notice from my briefcase and laid it on the small kitchen table. That doubled as our dining area. The stark, black letters seemed to shout in the dim light. Eviction notice. Past due. $3,400. She stared at it, her face paling. The vibrant blue on her cheek suddenly looked like a bruise. Oh. The word was barely a breath. Yes. Oh. I repeated, the sound sharp, cruel. I felt a flash of satisfaction at her distress, and the feeling sickened me. But I couldn't stop it. The bitterness was a poison I'd been sipping for months, and now it was flooding my system. I've been covering our shortfalls with my credit card, Anne, but it's maxed out. Completely. There's nothing left. I let the silence hang in the air, thick and heavy. I watched her, my gaze analytical, detached. I saw the way her throat worked as she swallowed, the slight tremble in her lower lip. I cataloged these reactions, filed them away. Emotions were data points, and the data was telling me we were at a dead end. I thought we had more time, she whispered, her eyes still fixed on the paper as if it were a death sentence. Time is a luxury we don't have. Money is a luxury we definitely don't have. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. It was a defensive posture. a posture I'd learned from my father. I have one last option, but you're not going to like it. Her eyes finally lifted from the notice to meet mine. They were beautiful eyes, a warm, deep brown, like rich earth. They were the eyes I had fallen in love with, full of passion and dreams. Now, they were just full of fear. What is it, Kellen? I'm going to call my father. The reaction was instantaneous. Her whole body recoiled as if I'd struck her. No. The word was sharp, fierce. It was the most life I'd seen in her all day. Absolutely not. You can't. After everything he said, everything he did. You swore you would never go back to him. I also swore I wouldn't end up homeless, I countered, my voice dangerously quiet. He disowned. Me, Anae. He didn't erase my existence. He's still my father. He won't let his only child starve on the streets. It would be bad for his image. The cynicism in my own voice surprised me. It was a cold, hard thing. He'll make you beg, she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and dread. He'll humiliate you, and he'll blame me. He'll say this is all my fault. And would he be wrong? The question slipped out before I could stop it, venomous and unfair. The impact was as real as a physical blow. She flinched, her face crumbling. The hurt in her eyes was a physical pain in my own chest, a hot poker twisting in my gut. But I didn't take it back. I couldn't. It was true, wasn't it? In a way, my life was a bonfire of my own making. But she was the one who handed me the match. We met at a gallery opening. I was there on my father's arm, bored, playing the part of the dutiful heir. She was there as a server, her artist's hands. So incongruous, holding a tray of champagne flutes. I saw her staring at a chaotic, brilliant, abstract piece with an expression of such profound understanding, such longing. I was captivated. Within 6 months, I had turned my back on $1 billion inheritance for a life with her in this tiny, turpentine-scented apartment. My father's final words to me echoed in my memory. This bohemian gutter snipe has bewitched you. You are choosing a life of poverty and irrelevance with a woman who will offer you nothing but paint fumes and debt. When you come crawling back, and you will come crawling back, don't expect me to welcome you. You are no longer my child. That's not fair, Kellen, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Fairness is a concept for children's stories, I said, turning away from her. I couldn't look at her tears. They were a currency I could no longer afford to accept. It has no place in the real world. I'm going to make the call. I walked into our small bedroom and shut the door, leaving her alone with the eviction notice and my cruelty. My hands were shaking as I pulled my phone from my pocket. Her name was still in my contacts, nestled between my father's and my lawyer's. Serafina Sterling, my stepmother, the elegant, powerful viper my father had, married a year after my mother's death. She was the one who had engineered my exile, whispering poison into my father's ear about Anae, about my betrayal. She was a master manipulator, her every move calculated for maximum effect. Calling my father directly would be a fool's errand. His pride was a fortress. But Serafina, she enjoyed the drama. She would relish the opportunity to see me humbled. She was my only way in. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and pressed the call button. It rang twice. Kellen. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, smooth as velvet, with an undercurrent of something sharp and cold, like a shard of glass hidden in a pile. There was no surprise, no warmth, just a calm, knowing acknowledgement, as if she'd been expecting my call for 3 years. Serafina, I replied, keeping my own voice level, detached. An emotional response was a concession of power. I would give her nothing, To what do I owe the honor? The question was laced with a delicate, mocking amusement. Have you finally tired of playing the starving artist's muse? I need to speak with my father. I cut straight to the point. No preamble, no begging. A statement of intent. A soft, musical laugh traveled down the line. Oh, darling, Marcus is indisposed. You know how he is, terribly busy, building his legacy, something you were supposed to be a part of, if I recall. Every word was a carefully aimed dart. This is important, Serafina. I'm sure it is, she purred. Let me guess. You've run out of money. The little painter's masterpieces aren't flying off the shelves. What a shock. I looked her up. You know, Anne Dubois, quaint. Her work is derivative, uninspired. She has no formal training, no gallery representation. She's a hobbyist, Kellen, and you threw your life away for a hobbyist. My knuckles were white from gripping the phone. Breathe, Kellen. Analyze, don't react. She was testing me, prodding, for a weakness. Put him on the phone. He doesn't want to talk to you, she said, the amusement gone, her voice now hard as diamond. You made your choice. You chose her over your family, over your birthright. You publicly humiliated him. Did you really think you could just call up 3 years later and expect a handout? This isn't a handout. It's a loan. I'll pay it back. With interest. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Alone, her laughter was louder this time. Genuinely entertained. With what? Darling. Your gallery assistant's salary? Oh, wait. You're not even that. Are you? You're some sort of data entry clerk. How delightfully pedestrian. She knew my job title. Of course she did. She'd made it her business to keep tabs on my descent. The knowledge was a violation, leaving me feeling exposed, vulnerable. I have a proposition for him. A business proposition. It was a lie, a desperate gambit. But it was all I had. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning. In her sophisticated, cruel mind. I'm listening. Not over the phone, I said, my confidence growing. I was back on familiar ground now. Negotiation. Strategy. This was the world I was raised in. I'll come to the house tomorrow night. I'll present it to him then. Another pause, this one longer. She was considering the angles. The entertainment value of my humiliation versus the potential for some unknown business play. The drama would be irresistible to her. Very well. She said finally, tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Don't be late. And Kellen, yes? Do try to look presentable. We have standards to maintain. The line went dead. I stood in the silence of the bedroom, the phone still pressed to my ear. I had done it. I had opened a door I had sworn to keep welded shut. The wave of relief was immediately followed by a tidal wave of dread. I had no proposition, no plan. I had only a desperate hope that my father's residual affection, buried under years of pride and anger, might be enough. I walked back into the living room. Anne was sitting at the kitchen table, her arms wrapped around herself. The eviction notice was gone. She'd folded it into a tiny, neat square. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. She looked up at me as I entered. You did it, she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak. When tomorrow, 7. She stood up and walked over to her easel. With a deliberate, almost ceremonial movement, she turned it around. The canvas was a maelstrom of color, a chaotic explosion of reds and blacks and deep, violent purples. It was raw, powerful, and deeply unsettling. It was a perfect portrait of the inside of my head. In the center of the chaos, almost lost, was a tiny, fragile speck of brilliant, hopeful gold. I was trying to paint how I felt, she said quietly, her back to me. About us, about everything. I stared at the painting, at the storm and the tiny fleck of gold fighting to survive within it. For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than bitterness or anxiety. It was a flicker of something else. Maybe she wasn't just splashing paint. She was speaking a language I had forgotten how to hear. Sell it, I said. The words coming out harsher than I intended. She turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. What? The painting, I said, gesturing toward it. Sell it. We need money. Any money. Take it to one of those tourist traps in the market. Sell it for $50. $100. Whatever you can get. The light in her eyes died. It was as if I had reached into her chest and snuffed out a candle. Kellen, this piece isn't. It's not for that. It's not finished. Nothing is ever finished, N.A. We don't have time for you to be precious about your art. The word came out as a sneer. I saw her flinch, and I hated myself for it, but I couldn't take it back. I was a cornered animal, lashing out at the only other creature in my cage. We need to survive. Do you understand that? Survival? It's the only thing that matters. Right now. She looked from my face to the painting, then back again. A long, silent moment passed between us. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, with the ghosts of 3 years of shared dreams now turning to dust. Finally, she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. All right, she whispered. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty. I had won the battle, but the war for my soul felt irrevocably lost. The next evening, I stood before the polished oak doors of my father's mansion, the house of my childhood. It seemed larger now, more imposing. Or perhaps I had just become smaller. I was wearing my only suit, a charcoal gray wool that was now a little too tight in the shoulders and a little too loose in the waist. I had spent an hour ironing my shirt, trying to project an aura of success I was nowhere near feeling. Before I could knock, the door swung open. A new butler I didn't recognize. A man with a severe face and an even more severe posture looked down, his nose at me. Ms. Sterling is expecting you. He used my surname, but it felt like a courtesy, not a fact. He led me through the grand foyer, my cheap dress shoes echoing on the marble floors. Everything was exactly as I remembered it, yet different. Colder. It was less a home and more a museum curated to display wealth and power. The air smelled of lemon polish and money. So much money. Serafina was waiting in the main salon, standing by the massive Carrara marble fireplace. She was breathtaking, as always. A vision in a cream-colored silk gown that probably cost more than my annual salary. A diamond necklace glittered at her throat. She held a glass of white wine, her fingers long and elegant, her nails a perfect blood red. Kellen, she said, her lips curving into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You came. I'm so glad. Where is he? I asked, ignoring the pleasantries. Patience, darling. He'll be down in a moment. She gestured to a leather armchair opposite her. Have a seat, drink. No, thank you. Sitting felt like a surrender. I remained standing, creating the illusion of being her equal, even as the opulence of the room screamed at me that I was not. So, she began, taking a delicate sip of her wine. This proposition, I'm all ears. Or is this really just about the money? You can be honest with me. It's a legitimate business proposal, I said, my voice steady. The lie came easier the second time. It's an opportunity in an emerging art market. High risk, high reward. Exactly the kind of venture he loves. Serafina raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Art? Don't be ridiculous. Your father considers the modern art market to be a playground for fools and money launderers. You, of all people, should know that. This is different, I insisted, scrambling to invent details for a plan that didn't exist. It's about leveraging technology data analytics to predict breakout artists before they're discovered. It's art as a commodity, a pure financial instrument. She looked at me, her head tilted, a flicker of something that might have been genuine interest in her eyes. Or maybe it was just pity. You've been spending too much time with your little painter. It's addled your brain. Just then, heavy footsteps sounded on the grand staircase. My father appeared. Marcus Sterling was a titan. Even in his late 60s, he was a physically imposing man, with a shock of silver hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He wore a cashmere sweater and tailored trousers, the picture of casual power. His gaze swept over me, cold and appraising, as if I were a stranger who had wandered in off the street. "What is this?" he boomed, his voice filling the cavernous room. He didn't look at me. He looked at Serafina. Why is she here? The use of the third person was a deliberate cut, deep and precise. Kellen was just about to present us with a business proposition. "Marcus, darling," Serafina said smoothly, turning the full force of her charm on him. "Something about art." My father scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound. He finally deigned to look at me. "Art? You come crawling back to my home after 3 years to talk to me about art? The very thing that ruined you?" He took a step closer, his presence sucking the air from the room. I felt an old, familiar instinct to shrink, to apologize, to make myself smaller. I fought it down. "I came here to request a loan," I said, my voice tight. The fabricated business plan evaporated in the heat of his glare. Honesty, however humiliating, was my only path now. "I need $300 to $400 to avoid eviction." A terrible silence descended upon the room. My father's face was a mask of stone. Serafina watched us, her eyes glittering with undisguised pleasure. This was what she had wanted. The raw, unfiltered drama. The prodigal child. Broken and begging. My father let out a short, ugly laugh. $300 to $400. He said the amount as if it were pocket change, a triviality. To him, it was. To me, it was a mountain. You abandon a legacy worth billions for a woman who paints garbage, and you come back asking me for 8 pittance to pay your rent. He shook his head, a look of profound disgust on his face. "I told you this would happen. I told you she would drag you down into the gutter with her. Has she sold a single painting? Has she contributed anything other than debt and the smell of chemicals to your pathetic little life?" Every word was a hammer blow to my pride. I stood there and took it, my jaw clenched. This was the price. Humiliation. "I will give you the money," he said finally. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. For a second, I thought that was it. I had done it. But he continued, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl, "on one condition." I waited. "You leave her. You leave her." The words hung in the air, crystalline and cruel. They seemed to echo in the vast space of the salon, bouncing off the marble and polished wood, weaving through the silent, priceless artifacts. For a moment, my mind went completely blank. It was a system overload. The request was so monstrous, so far beyond the realm of what I had prepared for, that my brain simply refused to process it. Serafina's smile widened. It was a predatory, triumphant thing. She took another slow, deliberate sip of her wine, her eyes dancing with malevolent glee over the rim of the glass. She was drinking in my despair. Then the blankness shattered, and a cold, white-hot rage flooded the void. It was an emotion so pure, so potent, it almost made me dizzy. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. The pain was grounding. No. The word was quiet, but it cut through the silence with the finality of a blade. My father's expression darkened. It was the look he got right before he fired someone, right before he tore a multi-million-dollar contract to shreds. It was the look of a king whose decree had been questioned by a peasant. "What did you say?" I said no. I repeated, my voice gaining strength. The analytical part of my brain was coming back online, assessing the new data. The ultimatum wasn't a negotiation tactic. It was a declaration of war. He didn't want to help me. He wanted to break me. He wanted to prove that his initial judgment of me, of Ene, of our life, was correct. He needed to be right at any cost. The money is not worth the price. Price, he scoffed. Stepping even closer, I could smell his expensive cologne, a scent I used to associate with safety and power. Now it smelled like arrogance. "You are living in squalor with a woman who has given you nothing. I am offering you a lifeline, a chance to come back to the world you belong in, to have your life back. And you call that a price? It is a gift. It's a cage." I shot back, the raw emotion finally cracking through my detached facade. "One I already escaped. You don't want to give me my life back. You want to give me your life. A life where I am an accessory to your legacy, a name on a trust fund, a warm body in a boardroom. I am not that person anymore." "What are you then, Kellen?" Serafina interjected, her voice a silken thread of poison. "A failed idealist? A clerk in a cubicle? You speak of cages, but you live in a showbox, counting pennies and drowning in your girlfriend's mediocrity. It's all very tragic, really." I turned my head slowly to face her. "Stay out of this, Serafina." "Oh, but I'm very much in this," she replied, placing her wine glass on the mantel with a soft click. "I am the one who has to manage your father's disappointment. I am the one who has to maintain the family's reputation after you dragged it through the mud with your little rebellion." She walked towards me, circling me like a shark. "Your father is offering you salvation, a path back to relevance. Any sane woman would crawl on broken glass for this opportunity. Then it's a good thing I'm not just any sane woman," I said, my gaze locking back onto my father's. He was the one who mattered. She was just the serpent whispering in his ear. "I came here to ask for a loan, not to sell my soul." "Your soul?" My father laughed, a harsh, grating sound with no humor in it. "You don't have a soul left. You traded it for paint fumes and cheap wine. I am your creator, Kellen. I gave you everything: your education, your mind, your opportunities. You are the best of me, and you threw it all away. You gave me a blueprint." I corrected him, my voice shaking with the effort of keeping it level. "You never let me build anything of my own. Ene, she sees me, not the sterling name, not the heir to the fortune. Just me. You can't put a price on that." "I can," he said coldly. $3,400. That's her worth. That's the value of your great love. The price of 1 month's rent." He reached into the inside pocket of his cashmere sweater and pulled out a checkbook and a sleek, gold pen. The gesture was theatrical, contemptuous. He scribbled quickly, the pen scratching against the paper. He tore the check out and held it out to me. It was made out to cash for $10,000. "Here," he said, his voice flat. "Take it. Consider it a severance package for the daughter I once had." I stared at the check. $10,000? It would solve everything. Rent. The maxed out credit card. It would give us months of breathing room. It would be so easy, so simple. Just take the money and lie. Tell him what he wants to hear. Go home to NA, and we would be safe for a little while. The analytical part of my brain screamed at me to take it. It was the logical move, the strategic play. Secure the asset. Deal with the moral fallout later. But the flash of raw emotion, the part of me that was still human, the part of me NA had reawakened, rebelled. This wasn't just money. It was a symbol. It was acquiescence. It was defeat. Taking it would mean he had won. That he was right about me. That my love, my life, my choices, all of it could be bought and sold. I slowly raised my eyes from the check to his face, and I smiled. It was a small, bitter smile, but it was genuine. No, thank you, Father. I turned my back on him, on Serafina, on the $10,000. I'll find another way. I walked away. I didn't run. I walked my back straight, each step a measured act of defiance. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the heat of my father's fury and the cold shock of Serafina's surprise. I didn't look back. I walked through the grand foyer, past the severe butler who stared at me with open curiosity, and out the heavy oak doors into the cool night air. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, my legs gave out. I stumbled down the stone steps and leaned against a massive, ornate pillar, gasping for air as if I had been holding my breath for hours. My body was trembling, awash with adrenaline and a profound, bone-deep sorrow. I had done it. I had faced the dragon in his lair and walked out alive, if not entirely unscathed. But the reality of my situation came crashing back down on me. I was still broke. We were still being evicted. I had won a moral victory, but moral victories don't keep a roof over your head. The drive home was a blur. The opulent mansions of my father's neighborhood slowly gave way to the more modest homes of the suburbs, and finally, to the gritty, neon-lit streets of our part of the city. The contrast was a physical blow. I had just walked away from a world of effortless luxury, a world where $10,000 was an insult, and I was returning to a world where $10 for gas was a serious consideration. When I opened the door to our apartment, the smell of turpentine was gone. It had been replaced by the faint, cloying scent of cheap air freshener. Anne was sitting on the sofa, staring at the blank wall where her easel usually stood. The easel was folded up in the corner. The chaotic, emotional painting was gone. My heart sank. You sold it. She looked up at me, her face impossibly tired. Hi? How did it go? She was avoiding my question. Anne, I pressed, my voice gentle but firm. The painting. Did you sell it? She finally nodded, a jerky, unhappy movement of her head. Yes, for how much? She hesitated, chewing on her lower lip. $50? The amount was so paltry, so pathetic. It was like a punchline to a cruel joke. I had just turned down $10,000 on principle, and she had sold a piece of her soul for $50. The irony was suffocating. $50. I repeated, my voice hollow. He said it was too dark. She explained, her voice small. The man at the market gallery. He said people want pretty things. Landscapes. Flowers. He didn't want it. But a woman overheard us and said she liked it. She offered me $50 for it. She said it was all she had. Her voice broke. I took it. I'm sorry, Kellen. I know it's not enough, but it's something. I looked at her, truly looked at her worn-out jeans, the exhaustion in her eyes, the hope she was so desperately trying to cling to for my sake. The rage I'd felt at my father's house melted away, replaced by a wave of fierce, protective love. She had done what I'd asked. She had swallowed her pride, taken something deeply personal, and sold it for a pittance to try and help us. Don't be sorry, I said, crossing the room and sitting down next to her on the lumpy sofa. I took her hand. It was cold. You did nothing wrong. I pulled the $50 bill from her other hand. It was crumpled and warm. Thank you. She leaned her head against my shoulder, a silent, weary surrender. What did your father say? Will he help us? I thought about the check, about the condition, about the cold, dead look in his eyes. Lying to her felt like a betrayal, but the truth felt like a burden she couldn't possibly bear right now. He's considering it. I lied. It's complicated. We sat in silence for a long time, the $50 on the table between. US felt more like an insult than a lifeline. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was Mara, my oldest friend, the only person from my old life who hadn't abandoned me when I walked away from it all. Mara was a pragmatist, an art history PhD who had eschewed the stuffy world of academia to work as a high-end art consultant and appraiser for insurance companies. She was grounded, brilliant, and had no patience for nonsense. It's Mara, I said to N.A. You should answer. Maybe she has good news, N.A. whispered, ever the optimist. I swiped to answer, putting the phone on speaker. Mara, too. What do I owe the pleasure? Kellen. Cut the crap. Mara's voice came through, sharp and efficient as always. I'm calling about N.A. I went by that tourist trap gallery in the market this afternoon to see a client's piece, and I saw her talking to that sleazebag owner, Alistair. She looked upset. So I hung back. I watched her sell a painting to some tourists for pocket change. There was a pause. It was the piece I saw in your apartment last month, wasn't it? The big, chaotic one. Yes, I said, my stomach tightening. And you let her sell it for $50? Mara's voice was incredulous, laced with a rare anger. Are you out of your mind? I told you that piece was special. We need the money, Mara, I said defensively. We're being evicted. So you sell the golden goose for the price of a single egg. Bad move, Sterling. She sighed, a sound of pure frustration. Look, after the woman who bought it left, I went and talked to Alistair. I asked him if he got the buyers. Information. He's a slimeball, but he's a meticulous slimeball. He keeps records of every transaction, no matter how small. He said the buyer was a tourist, paid cash, but he got her name for his mailing list. Why? I asked, confused. What does it matter? It matters, Mara said, her voice dropping, becoming more serious. Because I think Anae just sold a masterpiece for the price of a cheap print. I need that buyer's name. Kellen, are you listening to me? Really listening? I sat up. Straight, my heart starting to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Anae looked at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. I'm listening, I said. That painting, the technique, the layering, the raw emotion in it. It's not just good, Kellen. It's important. But that's not the half of it. I saw something last time I was over, but I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. I did some research. She took a deep breath. Anae, that signature you use, the little double A with a line through it, where did you get that from? Anae spoke for the first time, her voice timid. It was my grandmother's, my mama. She used to paint. She taught me everything I know. She always signed her work that way. It's in her memory, a heavy. Silence fell from Mara's end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of her typing on a keyboard. Mara, what is it? I demanded. Kellen, Anae's grandmother. What was her name? Her full name? Alina Dubois. Anae answered. She passed away about 15 years ago. Why? I heard a sharp intake of breath from Mara. Oh, my God, she whispered. I was right. Right about what? I nearly shouted, my patience gone. Elena Dubois wasn't just a hobbyist. Nay, Mara said, her voice filled with a stunned reverence. She was A.D. Dubois, the reclusive, almost mythical abstract expressionist who appeared in the Paris art scene in the 60s, and then vanished without a trace in the early 80s. People thought she was a man. Her work is legendary. There are only a dozen confirmed pieces in existence, and they sell for millions. Millions, Kellen. Another pause. Your wife hasn't just been painting. She's been continuing the legacy of one of the most enigmatic and valuable artists of the 20th century. The silence that followed Mara's words was a physical thing. It was denser than the air in my father's salon, heavier than the eviction notice had ever been. It pressed in on us, filled with the ghosts of a grandmother Annie never truly knew, and a future that had just violently rewritten itself. Millions. The word didn't even seem real. It was an abstract concept, like infinity or true north. Anne stared at the speakerphone, her face a mask of utter disbelief. Her skin was ashen, making the old smear of blue paint on her cheek look like a fresh bruise. She slowly shook her head, a tiny, jerky movement of denial. No, she whispered, her voice raspy. That's not possible. My mommin'. She was just a baker. She and my grandfather ran a small patisserie outside of Lyon. She painted in the attic. It was her secret, her escape. She wasn't famous, the art world's best kept secret. Mara's voice crackled from the phone, insistent and sure. A.D. Dubois was a phantom. No one knew who they were. The speculation has been a cottage industry for decades. They said he was a disgraced nobleman, a rogue professor, even a defrocked priest. No one ever considered it was a woman, a baker, a grandmother. It's the perfect cover story because it's the truth. My own shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a cold, thrilling clarity. The pieces were slotting into place with breathtaking speed. It was like watching a complex algorithm solve itself in real time. The data points had all been there. I just hadn't known how to read them. Anne's innate, untrained talent. The signature. The almost compulsive need to paint that had nothing to do with fame or money. It wasn't a hobby. It was an inheritance. An obsession passed down through her blood. My gaze shifted from the phone to Anne. I saw her not as my struggling wife, the gentle dreamer whose art couldn't pay the rent. I saw her as the heir to a secret kingdom. And that kingdom was our key, our weapon. The bitterness I had harbored for months, the resentment over our poverty, it all evaporated. In its place, something far more potent began to crystallize. It was cold and hard and exquisitely sharp. It was purpose. And it tasted like revenge. My father's words echoed in my mind. Has she contributed anything other than debt and the smell of chemicals to your pathetic little life? A slow smile spread across my face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator that has just caught the scent of its prey. Oh, you have no idea, I whispered to myself. Kellen. Anne, are you still there? Mara's voice pulled me back. I picked up the phone, my movements precise, my mind firing on all cylinders. The fog of despair was gone. We're here, Mara. What's the plan? First things first, Mara said, her tone all business. We have to get that painting back before that woman who bought it realizes what she has. Or worse, she sells it to someone else, and it disappears forever. I need that buyer's name. I can't go myself. Fallister knows who I am. He'll get suspicious. Kellen, you have to go. I'll go, I said without hesitation. He's not going to just give you the name. Mara warned. He's greedy and paranoid. You'll need leverage. Don't worry, I said, my eyes flicking around our tiny apartment. It was no longer a cage. It was a launch pad. I'm very good with leverage. I looked at Anne. She was still in a state of shock, her arms wrapped around her waist as if to hold herself together. Her fear was a liability. I needed her focused. Anne. I spoke her name, and her head snapped up. My voice was different. The weary frustration was gone, replaced by a calm, unshakable authority. Tell me about your grandmother. Tell me everything you remember. I don't know, she stammered. She was quiet, kind. She always smelled of sugar and turpentine. When I was little, she would take me up to the attic and let me watch her paint. She told me it was our secret world. Did she ever talk about Paris, about a gallery, a dealer? I pressed, my mind working, searching for any detail that could be used. No, never, Anne said, her brow furrowed in concentration. She said the world outside the attic wasn't kind to women with paint on their hands. She said our art was for us, for our own hearts. It wasn't for selling. It wasn't for other people. She looked down at her own hands, stained with faint traces of pigment. She would be horrified by this. That I sold her memory for $50. Tears welled in her eyes, born of shame and confusion. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I compartmentalized it. We did not have time for an identity crisis. She was protecting you, I said, my voice softening slightly. It was a calculated move to build her back up, and she was protecting her work. But she's gone, Anne, and the world has changed. Her legacy doesn't belong in an attic anymore. It belongs to you, and we are going to claim it. I stood up. The lethargy of the past year fell from my shoulders like a heavy coat. I felt alive. I felt like myself again. The Kellen Sterling my father had raised sharp, ruthless, and strategic. He had honed me into a weapon, and now I was going to turn that weapon on him. Mara, stay on the line, I commanded. Anne, are there any other paintings? Anything your grandmother left you? Canvases, sketchbooks, journals? Anne's eyes widened. Her trunk. When she died, she left me her old painting trunk. It's heavy. I never opened it. It felt too final. Where is it? It's in the storage locker, she whispered. The one we're 2 months behind on paying for. Of course, another problem. But it was a manageable one. A data point to be factored into the new equation. Okay, we'll deal with that later. Right now, I'm going to the gallery. I went into the bedroom and looked at my reflection. The tired woman in the cheap suit who had begged her father for money was gone. In her place was someone else. Someone with a fire in her eyes. I took off the tie and unbuttoned the top button of my shirt. I undid my severe bun, letting my dark hair fall to my shoulders. I was done looking like a supplicant. When I walked into that gallery, I would not be asking for a favor. I would be making a demand. What are you going to do? Anne asked from the doorway, her voice trembling. I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Allister, I said, putting my phone in my pocket, but leaving the call with Mara active. I wanted her to be my witness, my remote backup. He thinks he's a shark in a fishbowl. He's about to find out what it's like to swim with something that has bigger teeth. The market gallery was a narrow, poorly lit space crammed with the kind of art designed to match sofas. Generic seascapes, garish floral still lifes, and abstract paintings that were all color and no soul. The air smelled of dust and desperation. At the back, behind a cluttered desk, sat a man in a rumpled linen jacket. He was balding, with a small, prim mouth and shifty eyes that darted around the room as if expecting a raid. This had to be Alistair. He looked up as I approached, his expression shifting from boredom to a practiced, smarmy interest. Good evening. Can I help you find something? Perhaps a nice landscape to brighten up a room? I'm not here to. Bye, Alistair, I said, my voice low and even. His eyes narrowed slightly at the use of his name. Do I know you? You know my wife? I said, placing my hands flat on his desk and leaning forward. Invading his space, Anne Dubois. She was here a few hours ago. Small woman, dark hair, probably had paint on her cheek. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed immediately by a flicker of defensive contempt. Ah, yes. The artist. He practically spat the word. Look, if she's decided she wants more money for that dark, depressing thing she sold, you can forget it. A deal's a deal. $50, cash, no refunds. Oh, I'm not here about the money, I said with a thin smile. I'm here about your records. You sold her painting to another woman. I want that woman's name and contact information. He laughed, a short, wheezing sound. You must be joking. I can't give out customer information. Privacy laws. You know. He leaned back in his chair, puffing out his chest, enjoying his perceived power. Sorry. Can't help you. I think you can, I said, my smile vanishing. And I think you will. You see, I know a little bit about you, Alistair. I know that many of the original paintings in this gallery are, in fact, remarkably good forgeries of works by more famous, but not too famous, regional artists. Easy to copy, hard to prove definitively without expensive analysis. I also know that you often buy these pieces for cash from desperate art students and sell them with certificates of authenticity that you print yourself in your back office. His face lost all its color. His prim little mouth fell open. That's a slanderous accusation, is it? I tilted my head. Because my friend Mara, the insurance appraiser, is very interested in your business model. She finds it fascinating, as I'm sure would the IRS. All those cash transactions, it must be a nightmare to keep track of for tax purposes. Unless, of course, you don't. I let the threat hang in the air between us. He stared at me, his shifty eyes wide with panic. He was trying to assess if I was bluffing. He saw the look on my face and realized, to his horror, that I was not. What do you want? He stammered, his bravado completely gone. I told you. The name and contact information of the woman who bought my wife's painting. Now, he swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. With a trembling hand, he turned to his computer, his fingers clicking frantically on the keyboard. He was sweating. The woman, she said, she was a tourist from Germany, only in town for a few days, here for some medical conference. My heart hammered against my ribs. Germany. This was a complication. The name, I repeated, my voice like ice. Her name is Elkschmidt, he read from the screen. She paid cash, but I got her to give me an email for the mailing list. He scribbled it down on a piece of paper and pushed it across the desk towards me, as if it were radioactive. I took the paper, e.schmidt.med@berlin.d, an email address. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a thread. Thank you for your cooperation, Alistair, I said, folding the paper and putting it in my pocket. I stood up straight. Just so we're clear, you will not contact this woman. You will not speak of this to anyone. You will forget this conversation ever happened. If I hear that you have so much as whispered my wife's name, I will personally see to it that your life is dismantled piece by piece. Do you understand me? He nodded mutely, looking like a terrified toad. I turned and walked out of the gallery. My head held high. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep, steadying breath. I had the first piece of the puzzle, through the phone still active in my pocket. I heard Mara's voice, quiet and full of awe. Damn, Sterling. You're scary. I'm just getting started, I said, a grim sense of satisfaction settling over me. I had a name. I had a mission. And for the first time in 3 years, I had a future to fight for. Not just for survival, but for total, all-consuming victory. I walked back into the apartment, and the first thing I saw was Anais's face. She was standing in the middle of the room, exactly where I'd left her, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. She looked like a fawn caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. On the speakerphone, sitting on our rickety kitchen table, Mara was silent, waiting. I have it, I announced, the words cutting through the tense quiet. I held up the slip of paper from Alistair as if it were a trophy. Her name is Elkschmidt. She's a German tourist. I have an email address. Germany. Mara's voice was tight with concern. That's not good. That's a continent away. The trail could go cold in a matter of hours. It's all we have. I countered, my mind already sifting through possibilities. It's a thread. I can work with a thread. I looked at N.A. Her hands were trembling. This was too much, too fast. The abstract concept of her grandmother's fame had just become a concrete problem. With an international flight path, I needed to ground her, to make her part of the solution, not a victim of the circumstances. Nay, I said, my voice softer. Now, we need you, Mara, and I can handle the strategy, the hunt. But you are the only one who can authenticate this. You are the expert on Alina Dubois. No one else on earth has your knowledge. She blinked, the words slowly sinking into expert. It was a role she had never considered for herself. I don't know anything. You know the smell of her attic, I said, walking closer to her. You know the way she held her brush. You know the secrets she whispered to you when you were a child. That is more than any art historian knows. That knowledge is priceless. It was a calculated statement designed to empower her, to shift her perspective from fear to value. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, the first spark of strength. Okay, Mara said, her voice pulling our attention back to the phone. Kellen's right. Let's focus on what we can control. The email. This has to be handled with extreme delicacy. You can't sound like a Nigerian prince scam. You can't sound demanding. You need to intrigue her. Make her want to reply. I sat down at the table, took out my laptop, and opened a new email draft. The blinking cursor on the blank screen seemed to mock me. To e.schmidt.med@Berlin. The subject. What's the subject line? I asked. It has to be something she'll open. Regarding your recent art purchase, Mara suggested. It's professional, vague enough to be intriguing. I typed it in. Okay. What next? Introduce yourself, Mara instructed. Explain that you are the husband of the artist whose work she purchased. No, wait, wife. I shot a glare at the phone. Yes, Mara. Wife, right. Wife of the artist. She corrected herself. Compliment her taste. People love to be told they have a good eye. I began to type, carefully crafting each sentence. My father had taught me that a well-written letter could be more powerful than a signed contract. It was about controlling the narrative. Dear Dr. Schmidt, I am writing to you regarding the painting you purchased earlier today. At the Market Gallery, the piece by the artist N.A. Dubois. My name is Kellen Sterling, and N.A. is my wife first. I want to thank you. N.A. was hesitant to sell that particular piece as it holds a deep personal significance. Knowing that it went to someone who genuinely connected with it means a great deal to us both. Okay, that's good, Maris. Voice approved. Now, the difficult part. You have to create urgency without creating suspicion. We could say the painting is part of a series and we need to photograph it for a catalog. Before it leaves the country, I suggested we could offer to buy it back at a premium. Yes, Mara exclaimed. Perfect. Offer her double what she paid. $100. It shows you're serious, but it's not an amount that screams. This is a stolen lottery ticket. It's a believable, sentimental gesture. I continued typing, my fingers flying across the keys. The words flowed, a careful blend of professional courtesy and subtle urgency. The painting is part of a deeply personal series Anne is developing, and in our haste, we neglected to take a high-quality photograph for her portfolio. This was a significant oversight on our part. I know this is an extraordinary request, but would you be willing to allow us to photograph the work before you leave the city? We would, of course, be happy to come to you at your convenience. Furthermore, if you were at all open to it, we would be prepared to buy the painting back from you for double the purchase price, plus a small token of our gratitude for your understanding. I realize you are a visitor here with a busy schedule, but a quick response would be immensely appreciated. This is a matter of great importance to my wife's emerging career. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Kellen Sterling. You read it aloud to Mara and Anne. It's perfect, Mara said. It's polite, plausible, and it puts the ball in her court. Send it. Now, my finger hovered over the mouse. I looked at Anne. She gave me a small, trembling nod. I clicked send. The email disappeared into the ether. A tiny digital message in a bottle cast out into a vast ocean. Now, all we could do was wait. What now? Anne asked, her voice barely a whisper. Now, I said, closing the laptop and standing up. We go to the storage locker. It's time to open that trunk. The storage facility was a bleak, monolithic building on the industrial edge of town. It smelled of dust, damp concrete, and forgotten things. We stood before the roll-up metal door of Unit 314, a flimsy padlock securing it. The overdue notice, red and angry, was still stuck to the corrugated metal. I had used the $50 from the painting, plus another $40 I scraped together from change jars and the emergency cash in my wallet to pay the 2 months of back rent. The woman at the front desk had looked at me with bored pity. It was a familiar look. I was determined I would never see it again. Anne stared at the lock. I haven't been here in years, she said quietly. After Mom died, my parents shipped this trunk over from France. They said it was full of her old art supplies and junk. They wanted to throw it out. They didn't know, I said, fitting the key into the padlock. It was stiff from disuse. No, she agreed. They didn't know. With a screech of protesting metal, I slid the heavy door upwards, revealing a small, dark cube. It was mostly empty, save for a few boxes of my old college textbooks and one object. Sitting in the center of the dusty floor like a sarcophagus dot, it was a large, sea-worn wooden trunk, at least 4 feet long, bound with dark, rusted iron straps. Carved into the lid, almost invisible under a layer of grime, were the initials AD. We dragged it out into the harsh fluorescent light of the hallway. It was incredibly heavy. For a few long moments, we just stared at it. This was it. The treasure chest. The black box. The proof. Are you ready? I asked. Anne nodded, her eyes fixed on the trunk. She knelt and placed a hand on the lid, her touch gentle, reverent. Hello, Maman, she whispered. The trunk wasn't locked. The 2 iron clasps on the front were stiff and corroded, but I managed to pry them open with my car key. My heart was pounding. This was the moment of truth. Everything Mara had said, everything I had just gambled on. It all came down to what was inside this box. I lifted the heavy wooden lid. A powerful, familiar scent washed over us, a ghostly perfume from the past. It was the rich, sharp smell of old turpentine, dried linseed oil, and aging paper. Anne gasped, a sob catching in her throat. It was the smell of her grandmother's attic. It was the smell of her childhood. The top layer was composed of dozens of canvases, all unframed, all turned face down. They were wrapped in yellowing cheesecloth. I carefully lifted one out. It was light. The canvas stretched tight on its wooden frame. I turned it over. It was a storm of color, a whirlwind of furious, passionate brushstrokes in black, gold, and a deep, heartbreaking crimson. It was chaotic and yet perfectly balanced. It was raw, emotional, and utterly brilliant. It was unmistakably the work of the same artist who had painted the piece Anne had just sold for $50. And tucked into the bottom right corner was the signature, the elegant, unmistakable double A with a line through it. AD. My God, I breathed. Anne was already lifting out another canvas, and then another. Each one was a masterpiece, vibrating with a fierce, contained energy. They were portraits of an inner world, landscapes of a soul. Beneath the canvases, we found what we were truly looking for. There were stacks of sketchbooks. Their pages filled with preliminary drawings, notes on color mixing, and frantic, beautiful charcoal studies. And at the very bottom, nestled in a velvet-lined compartment, was a thick, leather-bound journal. Anne lifted it out, her hands shaking so badly I was afraid she would drop it. The leather was soft and worn. There was no name on the cover. She opened it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, written in faded blue ink. It was in French. October 12th, 1968. Anne read aloud, her voice trembling as she translated. Jean-Luc said today that I must choose the gallery or him, Paris or the patisserie. He does not understand. This is not a choice. One cannot choose whether or not to breathe. This fire in my hands, it is my breath. So I will lie. I will tell him I have chosen him. I will paint in secret. I will become a ghost. Let the world have A.D. Du Bois. He can be whoever they want him to be. Only my little Anne will know the truth of the woman in the attic. The last words from the journal hung in the dusty air of the storage facility. More real than the concrete walls around us. Only my little Anne will know the truth of the woman in the attic. Anne closed the journal, holding it to her chest as if it were a living thing. A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was one of profound, earth-shattering understanding. Everything she had ever felt about her art, the private joy, the secret shame, the compulsive need to create it, was all a reflection of a woman she barely remembered, a ghost who lived in her blood. She chose me, Anne whispered, her voice filled with a new kind of awe. She left it all for me. My own mind was reeling, but the shock was quickly being overwritten by a cold, exhilarating wave of strategic thought. This journal, this trunk, it wasn't just a collection of paintings. It was a story, a perfect, tragic, immensely valuable story. A reclusive female genius cheated by the patriarchal art world of the 20th century. Her legacy secretly passed to her granddaughter, who was discovered living in poverty. It was the kind of narrative the media, the galleries, and the auction houses would kill for. And I was going to make them pay for it. Yes, she did, I said, my voice firm, pulling Anne back from the precipice of her emotion. And we are not going to let her down. We worked in a focused silence after that, carefully repacking the priceless canvases and the precious sketchbooks. The trunk, once a symbol of forgotten junk, was now an arc. We carried it between us, a shared and sacred weight, and loaded it into my beat-up sedan. The drive back to the apartment was different. We weren't returning to our cage. We were returning to our command center. The tiny apartment was transformed by the presence of the trunk. It sat in the middle of the living room floor, dominating the space. It was a time capsule that radiated a quiet, powerful energy. Our shabby furniture, the cracked walls, the faint smell of failure, it all seemed to fade into the background. The room now had a purpose. Mara was still on the speakerphone, having listened with rapt silence to Inez's translation of the journal entry. "I need a drink," she said, her voice shaky. "I think I need a very, very expensive drink. Do you understand what this means? A verified journal changes everything. This isn't just attributing lost works anymore. This is rewriting a chapter of art history. You don't just have paintings, Kellen. You have the whole damn legend." "I know," I said, my gaze fixed on the trunk. "And we are going to control every single word of it." The next several hours passed in a blur of discovery. We ordered cheap pizza we couldn't afford, the grease-stained box looking profane next to the priceless artifacts spread across our floor. Anne, with a new, steady confidence, sat with the journal, translating passages aloud. Her voice grew stronger with every page. We learned of Alina's struggles, of dealers who tried to cheat her, of the quiet fury that fueled her explosive canvases. She wrote about color as if it were a living language, about her brushes as extensions of her soul. November 5th, 1972, Anne Reid. Today, a critic in Le Monde wrote that the work of A.D. Du Bois has a muscular, undeniably masculine force. I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. If only he knew this masculine force came from a woman who spent her morning kneading dough for croissants. Let them have their stories. My truth is in the paint. While Anne uncovered the past, I planned the future, with Mara as my expert counsel. "This can't be rushed," Mara insisted from the phone. "The first painting that comes to market has to be perfect. It has to be authenticated by the top people. We need to build a catalog raisin. We need to establish provenance so tight no one can question it. The journal is the key. Forget one painting," I said, my mind racing ahead. "I'm thinking bigger. We're not just selling art. We're launching an estate, the A.D. Du Bois Foundation. We control the authentication. We control the release of the work. We control the narrative. We don't just sell to a gallery. We make them our partners. We don't just sell to a museum. We endow a wing in her name." My voice was low, intense. I was sketching it all out on a notepad, a business plan. The kind of ruthless, world-conquering plan my father would have admired if it wasn't designed to be his undoing. He had called Anne worthless. I was going to make her name so powerful, so culturally significant, that the name Sterling would be a footnote in her story. He had offered me $10,000 to abandon her. I was going to build an empire worth 10,000 times that. On her terms. The revenge would not be loud and messy. It would be quiet, elegant, and absolute. It would be the establishment of a new dynasty that would eclipse his own. A foundation. Mara breathed. "Kellen, that's brilliant." "It's a fortress, exactly," I said. "A fortress to protect her legacy. And a cannon aimed directly at my father's pride," I thought. Anne looked up from the journal, her eyes shining in the lamplight. She had been listening, absorbing the scale of my ambition. The fear that had defined her for so long was being burned away by the fire of her grandmother's words and the cold steel of my plan. She was seeing the future not as something to be endured, but as something to be conquered. "He said my art was garbage," she said quietly. her voice devoid of its usual tremor. She was speaking of my father. He said I was dragging you down. He was wrong, I said, meeting her gaze. The bond between us, strained for so long by poverty and resentment, was being forged into something new, something unbreakable. We weren't just wives anymore. We were partners. Yes, she said, a slow, dangerous smile touching her lips. It was a smile I had never seen on her before. It was a smile that mirrored my own. It was just before dawn. The sky outside was beginning to soften from black to a deep indigo. We had a plan. We had the proof. We had the motivation. The only thing we didn't have was the first painting. Our entire multi-million-dollar future was dependent on the goodwill of a German tourist we had never met. The laptop sat on the table, silent. Every minute that passed without a reply felt like an eternity. Maybe she didn't get it, N.A. fretted, her newfound confidence wavering for a moment. Maybe it went to her spam folder. Or maybe she's on a plane, Mara added grimly. Or she thinks it's a scam and deleted it. No, I said, though my own stomach was in knots. The email was good. She'll reply. We just have to be patient. But patience was a luxury we didn't have. Every passing hour, the painting got further away. My carefully constructed plan, the foundation, the revenge it all hinged on. That first, crucial step. My gaze kept flicking to the laptop screen, willing it to change. And then, it happened. A soft, electronic ping echoed through the quiet room. The three of us froze. On the screen, a new notification had appeared. One new message in your inbox. From elkschmidt.schmidt.med@berlin.d subject, Ray, regarding your recent art purchase for a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. It was Schrodinger's email, in its unread state. It contained both our salvation and our ruin. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached out, my hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me, and positioned the cursor over the message. I looked at Anae. She nodded, her jaw set. I clicked. The email opened. The block of black text appeared against the white screen, stark and absolute. My eyes scanned the words, my brain parsing them for tone, for intent, for opportunity. From Elkschmidt E. Schmidt.med@berlin.d subject, Ray, regarding your recent art purchase to your Ms. Sterling. Thank you for your message. I must admit, your email is quite unusual. I am a cardiologist, here in the city for the International Symposium on Advanced Cardiac Imaging, and my schedule is, as you guessed, extremely tight. I did purchase the painting you mentioned. It is a very compelling piece. It spoke to me in a way I find difficult to articulate. The artist is clearly very talented. Ordinarily, I would dismiss such a request. However, something about your wife's work feels significant, and your message seems sincere. My flight back to Berlin departs this morning at 11 a.m. I am currently at the Grand Sterling Airport Hotel. If you can meet me in the lobby within the next hour, I can spare 15 minutes. I will have the painting with me, as it is packed in my carry-on luggage. We can discuss your proposition then. Regards. Dr. Elkschmidt's words hit me like a shot of ice water. Within the next hour, I glanced at the clock on the laptop. 6:15 a.m. The hotel was a 40-minute drive with no traffic. We had no time, no room for error. We have to go. Now, I said, jumping to my feet. The exhaustion from our all-night session vanished, replaced by a surge of pure adrenaline. What did she say? Anne asked, her face pale with anxiety. She'll meet us, I said, grabbing my keys and my wallet. At the airport hotel. We have less than an hour to get there. The airport. Anne's voice faltered. Kellen. What if she just takes it on the plane? What if this is a trap? It's not a trap, I said, my voice sharp with urgency. It's an opportunity. A 15-minute window to save a multi-million-dollar painting. Get your coat. Wait, Mara's voice shouted from the phone. You need a plan. You can't just go in there half-cocked. Kellen, listen to me. This woman, Dr. Schmidt, she's a scientist, a cardiologist. She's analytical. She will not be easily swayed by vague sentimentality. The story about needing a photograph might not be enough. It's all we have, Mara. I shot back, frustration coloring my tone. There's no time to invent something else. Don't invent, Mara said. Use the truth. A small piece of it. Anae, this is on you. Kellen is the hammer, but you have to be the key. You have to talk to her, artist to collector. Tell her about your grandmother, not the famous part. Just tell her she was the one who taught you to paint, and that this piece is a tribute to her memory. Connect with her. A scientist will respect genuine data. Your emotion, your story. That's the data. Anae looked terrified. I can't. I won't know what to say. I grabbed her hands. They were ice cold. Yes, you can, I said, looking her directly in the eye. You just spent all night reading your grandmother's words. Feel her strength. She painted in secret for decades. All you have to do is talk for 15 minutes. I squeezed her hands. You are Anae Dubois. You are the keeper of the flame. Now let's go. The drive was a tense blur of speed and silence. I pushed the car faster than I should have, my eyes darting between the road and the clock on the dashboard. Anae sat beside me, clutching the leather-bound journal in her lap as if it were a shield. The Grand Sterling Airport Hotel was a monument to corporate soullessness, a vast, impersonal structure of glass and steel. We ran from the car into the lobby, a cavernous space with polished granite floors, generic beige furniture, and the low, anonymous hum of travelers, coming and going. It felt like the last place on earth where a miracle could happen. We spotted her immediately. She was sitting in an armchair, separate from the others, a rolling carry-on bag beside her. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses and short, practical gray hair. She wore a tailored travel blazer and radiated an aura of calm, no-nonsense competence. She was checking something on her phone, her expression focused. This was Dr. Elkschmidt. As we approached, she looked up, her gaze assessing us coolly. Ms. Sterling, she asked, her German accent precise and understated. Dr. Schmidt, I said, extending a hand. Her handshake was firm. Thank you for meeting us. This is my wife, the artist, Anae Dubois. Anae gave a shy, nervous nod, clutching the journal tighter. Please sit, Dr. Schmidt said, gesturing to the chairs opposite her. She glanced at her watch. As I said, I do not have much time. We understand, I began, launching into the speech Mara and I had prepared. As I mentioned in the email, this is about getting a proper photograph for my wife's portfolio. We would be happy to compensate you for your time and buy the work back. She held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. Ms. Sterling, she said, her expression not unkind, but piercingly direct. I am a doctor. I spend my days looking at images of the human heart, searching for tiny, almost imperceptible truths. I am, by nature and by training, a poor liar and very good at spotting inconsistencies in a story. She folded her hands in her lap. You are not here because you forgot to take a photograph. The air crackled. She had called my bluff instantly. My strategic script was worthless. I felt a flash of panic. I looked at Anae, whose face had gone white. This was it, the moment of truth. Anae took a deep breath. I saw her knuckles were white where she gripped the journal. She looked at Dr. Schmidt, her eyes finding a courage I hadn't known she possessed. "You're right," Anne said, her voice quiet but clear. "That's not why we're here." She leaned forward, placing the worn leather journal on the table between them. "The painting you bought. It's the first piece I've ever sold. I painted it for my grandmother. Her name was Alina. She passed away some years ago." Dr. Schmidt's expression softened slightly. She listened, her full attention on Anne. "She was a baker," Anne continued, her voice gaining confidence as she spoke her truth. "But secretly, she was a painter, a brilliant one. She taught me everything. How to see the light, how to hold a brush, how to speak with colors when words are not enough. She had this little signature, a double A with a line through it. For Alina. I use it now, for her." She paused, her throat working. We were in a difficult position. I sold the painting out of desperation, and I have regretted it every moment since. Not because of the money, but because it feels as though I sold a piece of her memory. It is the first work that I feel truly honors her spirit. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply stated the facts of her heart. It was the most powerful negotiation tactic I had ever witnessed. Dr. Schmidt was silent for a long moment, her intelligent eyes studying Anne's face. Then, her gaze dropped to the old journal on the table. "May I?" she asked softly. Anne nodded, sliding it towards her. Dr. Schmidt didn't open it. She simply ran her fingers over the worn leather cover, a thoughtful, contemplative expression on her face. "In my profession," she said finally, "we learn that a life is not a single event, but a story told over time. A collection of moments. Some are quiet. Some are explosive." She looked up at Anne. "Your painting feels like one of those moments." She sighed and reached for her carry-on bag. She laid it on its side, unzipped a front compartment, and carefully slid out a flat, cardboard-wrapped package. She placed it on the table next to the journal. My heart stopped. "I paid $50 for it," Dr. Schmidt said. "We'd like to offer you $100, I said, my voice hoarse, already reaching for my wallet. She gave a smile. "Ms. Sterling, please. Let us not insult each other with such trivialities." She pushed the wrapped canvas towards us. "You do not need to buy back what is already yours." She stood up, preparing to leave. "It seems your grandmother gave you a great gift, Ms. Dubois. Do not sell it out of desperation again." I was speechless. Anne stood up, tears now shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what else to say. Thank you." "Think nothing of it," Dr. Schmidt said, picking up her bag. "I suspect I have received something far more valuable today than a $50 painting." She gave us a final, knowing nod. "I wish you both the very best of luck." And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the stream of travelers heading towards the security checkpoint. We stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, the low hum of the airport hotel buzzing around us. On the table sat the worn leather journal and the cardboard-wrapped canvas. Anne slowly reached out and pulled back the cardboard. There it was, the maelstrom of red and black and purple, the tiny, defiant fleck of gold at its heart. It was more beautiful and powerful than I remembered. We had it. We had our foundation stone. I looked at Anne, and she looked at me. A slow smile spread across her face, that new smile, the one that held the strength of her grandmother and the glint of my own steel. The war had just begun, but we had won the first battle, and our opponent had no idea we were even on the field.